here's Jason.
I'm Jason Neal. I've been a beekeeper for 13, 14 years. Went under the guidance of Paul Lundy there many years ago, and through him and the club, and lots of reading in my own time. Became incredibly successful and being a hobby beekeeper. We market our honey under Star Valley name, and I raise my own queens, and sell queens and sell nukes at certain times of the year, depending on how well everything's going. But today we're going to get you started. We're going to start beekeeping. Hive location. Can't stress enough, to give them as much sunshine as possible. You know, have the entrance pointing south, southeast, something like that. Give them as much sun as possible. If you keep them in the shade, if they're in a shaded area for long periods of time, they seem to get a little crankier, not as productive. But what you want to do is give them that first light and as much light during the day. Get that brood nest, get that box temperature up so that the brood nest can expand and get more bees. If you're up on a hill, I got some hives up on a hill there in Keyport. The wind whips through there really bad. I don't like putting entrance reducers up on my hives because sometimes you get bees dying in the winter time and plug up the entrance reducer. Some people use for entrance reducers, but I like to leave mine wide open. So what I come up with is a little 4-foot high by 8-foot long pieces of plywood that I just wrap right around the hives that stand out about 4 feet away. It gives a nice little microclimate in there, keeps the wind off the beehives, and they do very well that way. And it's a nasty wind over there on top of that hill.
Jason, can you speak up a little bit?
A little bit more?
Yeah.
Higher. I keep a lot of my bees down there in the bottom of the valley during the summertime, all over winter sun there in the valley, right next to Chico Creek. Get some mosses through there. It's not the ideal place to keep bees during the winter time. It's damp, it's cool, they just never get a break. There's no sunshine through there. Whatever survives in that area turns out to be pretty successful, but I wouldn't recommend doing anything like that. Just try to get some in a sunny location. Equipment condition. Be careful of used equipment. You can always reuse inner covers, hive boxes. You know, if there's any question as to if there was any disease in there whatsoever, you can take a torch to the inside of the box and torch it out. And that'll kill off American foul brood spores if there are any present, any other diseases. Frames, on the other hand, that are drawn out, you know, it's kind of hard to tell if they're good or bad. It really is. Unless it has active brood in it, in which case you can tell if it's got disease or if it's been treated with paramycin, which keeps the American foul brood disease down. So you've got to be real leery about used equipment, nuke cells. You know, try and get nukes from a reputable person if you want to buy nukes. Bees do very well with new equipment. You know, nukes are starter colonies. It's a queen with 5 frames of adhering bees. You generally get 2 to 3 frames of AXR with a cap brood with that. So it's just a miniature hive that you use as a starter. Here's some of the old styles of scaps. Nowadays, a lot of people don't use scaps anymore. It's a lot easier to use a Landschaft style or warriors with frames, or like Ted showed you last week, is top bar hive. But it's always nice to have those frames inspectable. You want to be able to go through those frames and see if you have a disease. If you can't go through those frames and see if you have diseases or an issue, then the problem is going unnoticed, and it'll just amplify itself. And next thing you know, you're losing your colony. One day it's looking really good, a month later it's not looking so hot. Okay, when you're starting out with your brand new equipment, always, if you've got a 10-frame box, put in 10 frames. If you've got an 8-frame setup, put in 8 frames. You want to make sure that when you have your new equipment, after you have your package of bees in there, that the frames are nice and tight there. If you leave gaps in your frames, or something wider than a bee space, and what you're going to get is bridge comb going straight across this way. We don't want that. We want them to draw it out like so. We don't want cross comb going in between frames. So keep those frames nice and tight.
Can you repeat what you just said? Will get what?
You'll get a cross comb
Oh.
going this way, going in between the frames. What you want is for the comb to come straight out from the foundation this way. So keep the frames nice and tight when you have new equipment. Always start out with 10. Have them build it out. If you want to switch over to a 9-frame system like Jerry does, wait till most of your frames are built out, and then you can go and pull out that extra frame and go 9-frame. Okay, never open a beehive unless outside temperature is 55 degrees Fahrenheit or above, and be careful about wind chill. Why is that? Who's been reading? What gets cold? All the bees will be fine.
They'll freeze, won't they? They won't be able to flap their wings.
Yeah, they can fly off and get paralysis of the wings. They don't have to cold. But what we're concerned about at this time of year is the brood. We don't want to have chilled brood. Use light-colored clothing. Jerry explained that last week as far as using light-colored clothing. When I do my bees, I don't wear this. I got a white t-shirt, I got a white hat on, and that's all I wear. Unless I'm messing around with somebody else's bees, then I'll put the suit on. So I don't know what their bees are like. Time of day for inspecting. Bees are more gentle in the afternoon on a sunny day when most of the bees are out foraging. And they don't like to be messed around with when it's overcast or raining or when it's dark. We've done a lot of beekeeping when it's dark, and it's no fun. They get very upset. They know where you're at, and you won't get stung if you mess with them when it's dark. Cold day. It was a cold day yesterday. I went out to mess around with my bees just a little bit, just seeing what was going on, and had to use a little extra smoke because they were irritable because it was cold out yesterday morning. The smoker. Different types of fuels. My favorite fuel is the burlap. Get these at coffee houses here locally. I didn't buy them. I got them for free, 2 pallets worth over there at the greenhouse in Kent, which is a coffee storage warehouse. I heard now that they charge, but I got these about 5 years ago with 2 pallets worth, and I still got a big stack of them left. So my preferred method is burlap. And as far as the smoker is concerned, what I like to do is I take a little piece of burlap, maybe about this big, and I light it. I love using this. I don't mess with matches. I'm in a hurry. So this is great. So what I do is I light up some burlap, get it going a little bit, use my hive tool to go ahead and shove it down inside the smoker. And to keep it going for a long time and for a nice cool smoke, what I do is I get another big piece of burlap and I have a bucket of water and I dunk it in that bucket of water and I saturate it. I take it out and squeeze out all the water, and then I'll put that on top of the hot piece of burlap inside the smoker. It'll last you a long time. The smoke will burn for a long time. It's a nice, cool, white smoke. I don't use cardboard, wood chips, pine needles, none of that, unless it's an emergency and I ran out of burlap. I've got to bring some. Yeah, a couple puffs at the bee entrance, and then I go ahead and take off the top. Give them some puffs there and try and drive them down a little bit. Anytime you have bees in your way, especially when you have a very large colony and you smoke them once, you'll notice that within a minute or so they kind of come back up and they're all over the place. You can't get your hands on the frames. Just give them a little puff, just kind of corral them in the direction that you want them to go so that you can access the frame and do your inspections. Never over smoke the bees, you may kill them and do harm to the brood. Why I smoke the heck out of them sometimes. Oh boy, I haven't killed a bee yet, but boy did I give a lot of smoke. It's one of the techniques for driving brood up, not brood, but nurse bees up from the lower chamber up to the upper chamber. And you have a queen excluder there, and you want to keep the queen down below, but you just want the nurse bees up in the top. And that requires a lot of heavy smoking, but I don't get any bees yet. Unless they got right up against the smoker and it was pretty hot. Always use your smoker. Always use a smoker, have one on hand. It'd be a lot more better for you as an experience, and it'd be better for the bees. Stinging. It's inevitable that you'll get stung from time to time. It happens. I got stung with my queenless colony yesterday 6 times. You know, 3 on this hand, 3 on this hand. You like the black watch I had on, I forgot to take it off. There's one after that. But, you know, here's stories about, hey, break out your credit card and scrape the stinger off. You never want to grab it with your fingers and pull it, because then you just squeeze the venom sac and all the venom goes inside your hand or your face, wherever it stung you. So you hear, hey, go grab your credit card. You know what? I might break out my wallet. And I scrape it out of there. Heck, it's already went in and pumped about 10 times. What do we have in our hand about 100% of the time when we're working bees? Hive tool. Hive tool works great. As soon as you get stung, just do that. Sometimes you'll have a bee coming right after you, and you know it's coming. You can see it. And sometimes, you know, I take the smoker. And I got the smoker going when you got a bee that's pretty upset at you. You go like this when she's after my face. Try to get her away. But she's relentless. And so what happens is that I got my hive tool in hand, and as soon as she nails me, sometimes I can go in and scrape it before it even detaches from her body. It gives her a second chance to come after me. So yeah, use your hive tool. Your hive tool is excellent for scraping out stings. Don't sharpen it too much, otherwise you're going to cut yourself. Don't give up beekeeping just because you get stung a few times. You're going to get stung. Even if you're in full gear, you'll find a way through that suit eventually. You know, you'll get one through the suit. Be prepared for the stings. I've got my little bucket of gadgets here. Always have an EpiPen in there, just in case you never know when you're going to become allergic. I know my wife's just dying to take that thing and jam it in my leg someday. When she gets stung, she gets cellulitis. It swells up really bad and gets really bad infection. So you got to be careful of that, getting infections. I don't know if you actually become immune to bee stings over a period of time. Mine seem to, I still puff up a little bit. I haven't seen any difference in 13 years. Some people probably do. Some people actually get worse. White sprays and antihistamines with you also. Okay, we talked about that. Removing the stinger. Infection.
Can you describe the stinger a little bit, how that works?
How it works?
I think that's interesting with the tube.
Oh yeah, so it's got this neat little barb on it. So when she stings you, it becomes detached from her body, which kills the bee, of course. And that barb is what keeps it from being removed from your body after she stings you. It stays in there. But then the venom sac sits there, and it just, what is it, about 2 minutes or so, I think, Paul? The full venom is released if you let it sit there and do that.
But the stinger is in 2 parts, right?
What's that?
The stinger is actually 2 parts.
I haven't researched that enough.
Oh, okay.
Making a start in beekeeping, acquiring bees. These are all packages. How many people are buying packages from Stedman? Quite a few people. And so they're going to come in a cage just like this. This is what we call a California mini cage that the queen comes in. And it's going to have a cork here on the bottom. And then she's going to be on the inside. There's a groove right here. She's going to be hanging on the inside with a cluster of bees. And right here is a feed can. And that's how you're going to get your bees. As far as getting them inside the hive, what you want to do is go ahead and shake the bees down gently, get them down on the bottom, give them a nice little shake like so. And use your hive tool to go ahead and pry the can up and out while the bees are down on the bottom. And then you want to gently pull this queen cage out. Whatever you do, don't drop it in there, because then it's just a mess trying to pull the queen cage out with all those bees. But don't pull the queen cage out, and then go ahead and replace the feeder back in here to keep the bees back. Keep the bees inside here.
You want to use smoker?
No.
Will they want to leave as soon as she's gone?
They're still in the cage.
Well, right, but if, provided you left it open, would they want to follow her out?
Eventually.
Yes. Okay.
I like to, when I used to do packages, I always like to do it in the cool morning, because the bees stay clustered better. As it starts warming up in the afternoon, the bees, you can see them running all around in the cage in there, and when you start dumping them upside down, they're just all over the place. Nice cool morning, they stay in a nice ball and go right in the box, nice.
Do you spray them with sugar water?
You can, but I don't bother with it myself, but some people do. You want to remove about 4 frames out of the box and give yourself some room to go ahead and shake the bees into there. But you have your queen here, and what you want to do is put her between 2 frames, and you want to have the screen facing away from the frame. Just like that. So the bees can see her through that screen. Okay. There's a neat little tab on this queen cage that you use, and you bend it right over the frame. And hold it in place. Just like that. See how that tab works? Okay, so right before you put it in there, she's going to come with a cork. There's a cork inside this cage that keeps her in there. You want to pull that cork out. Now, when you pull that cork out, you don't want to pull it out when she's facing in the direction of the cork. You pull it out, she's going to run right on out, and you just lost your queen. Okay? Always go ahead and go in and wait until she's turned around and go in the other direction, where there is no cork. Okay? So you're sitting here and you're looking at your queen. She's going this way. You pull the cork, put your finger over the hole. Okay? Wait till she turns around in the other direction again, and then you can stick a little mini marshmallow in there. Those little tiny marshmallows, everybody's familiar with those? There'll be some there at Stedman's, I believe, on package day that you can use. You stick that marshmallow in there, you twist it right down in there, so it's about flush with the cage.
Hey, Jason,
Yes?
how do you get the cork out?
What's that?
How do you get the cork out?
Oh, good question, Jerry. I use my hive tool. Take the corner of the hive tool. This one here has a different type of cork. It's actually a queen cell cup. But take the corner of your hive tool here and get down right where the cork is, and then you can gently pull it out.
Can I suggest something else?
Sure.
Sometimes using the hive tool, you're not real careful to push that cork in. Now, what I use is a sheetrock screw. It's like a long one, they're very sharp, and they got a wide thread, and they easily screw into it, the cork is soft, and it pulls right out.
So after we get the marshmallow in there, then we go ahead and put her in between 2 frames like we talked about earlier. Now we're ready for the bees.
You putting her in the middle, are you, or?
I like to put her off to the side a little bit because later on some people like to use the top feeder right here in the center, and I like to put that feeder right over the queen cage in case if the feeder leaks excessively and you're just drenching your queen.
Where do you have your daylight when you pull your 4 or 5 frames out at?
What's that?
When you take the first frames out, or is that off to one side, you're making that opening, or?
Yeah, what I'm doing is trying to make an area to go ahead and pour the package of bees in there when I pull out those frames. So we got this nice white spot here. Everybody see that?
Oh, gotcha, okay, thank
There you
you.
go. Let's make room for the bees that are in the package. so at this point, what we like to do is go ahead and take the package and give it a nice little shake like so. Catch it, all the bees go down towards the bottom. Use your hive tool to go ahead and pull the feeder out. Set the feeder off to the side. And if the bees are crawling up again already, I give them another shake until they're all balled up down on the bottom. And I flip it upside down and just in back and forth motion, just go back and forth like this. And then pull the bees out. Whatever's left in there, you can go ahead and shake them down one more time, get them balled up again, turn it upside down, and go back and forth and shake out the rest. That's one method of installing package bees. Yes?
And is that a 3-pound package of bees? Goes into one brood box?
Correct. Now, I like to give the bees, a minute or two to try and spread out a little bit because you're going to have a big clump of bees down there. You don't want to be shoving frames down there and squishing them or anything. So I give them about a minute or two to go ahead and settle out. They'll go out to the sides and start going up the frames a little bit. And when you do put your frames in there, they might be resting on the bees a little bit. You'll see your frames sticking up like so. Just let them stick up like that. Once your bees start moving around, they'll gently come back down like so. The bees will find the queen in there in that cage. And a good method to go ahead and feed them with is you put your undercover on. And I saw it here somewhere. There's one here. There it is. This is an undercover feeder. Holds a jar of syrup with perforated holes in the bottom. And this block allows the bees to come and go inside of the attic box area here. You put that right over the top with 1-to-1 sugar water. 1 part sugar, 1 part water. And then you have an attic box that goes on top of this. An attic box just being an empty Western box, or an empty juice box that goes on top of the lid.
So at this point, the marshmallow is still holding the queen in, right?
Correct. Yeah, the bees will go ahead and eat through the marshmallow and release the queen within a day. The other type of feeder that's out there is the division board feeder. This here's one of the newer ones that you can buy through Man Lake. It's got a ladder system in here to prevent drowning of the bees. This here is an old style, in which you can lose a lot of bees in there. They drown. They tend to make their way in there, but not their way out. So sometimes you find a couple hundred dead bees, in which case I like to put floating wood blocks in there, or that screen that you see sitting in there. This one here actually has a ladder system, so the bees have something to grab hold of and reduces the amount of bee loss when you go in for feed. So this here is a division board feeder. These are highly effective also. And you put it in there just like so. This one here looks like it probably holds a gallon. And then you put your undercover on, then you could just put a regular top on without an attic box. That's another feeder. Here's another feeder. This is an entrance feeder. It's got perforated holes. The cap here does. And that goes over a jar. It sits down inside of here. And this goes right up in there like so. I don't like using those as much. It kind of it kind of attracts other bees from other colonies. You can start robbing, and you don't want to really attract bees from other colonies. The sugar water tends to get a little colder out here on cold nights rather than staying warm like it would be inside the attic box or inside of a frame feeder on the inside. So these are my two preferred methods: is using this feeder or using the undercover feeder.
How many of the top ones would you want to have in your quart?
Well, top feeders? I just put in a quart jar.
One quart jar?
Yeah.
Or last for one day?
You feed them and as fast as they can take it, just keep on feeding it to them. Your package bees that are coming in here, when you have brand new equipment like this, boy, I remember years ago, people going, oh, you don't need to feed them. It'll be fine. There's plenty of nectar out there until it rained. And then my brand new bees perished because they had no food. So with brand new packages and brand new frames, you feed them constantly. You want to get these frames drawn out. As fast as they can take the feed, you give it to them. Okay? And get them to draw out these frames for you.
Can you give us an idea of how fast that might be? Like you said, a little pint, how fast would they go through that roughly?
Quart, depends upon the package that you have. They can go through it in a day and a half. They can go through it in 3 days.
Okay.
And as they, what's that?
Will the sugar water leak through those drilled holes or?
No. Yeah, you want to go ahead and drill them small enough and make sure that your cap has a good seal on it, the lid.
Do you, to mix the sugar and water, do you need to heat it up or something to make the solute sufficient?
Yeah, you can use just hot water
Okay.
and mix it up like that.
Is there a way to, is there a feeder that goes inside the hive that uses honey rather than sugar and water, or is designed for honey rather than sugar? I know, I feel like I'm saying something redundant, but I don't plan on using sugar and water. I plan on buying honey and bringing it back to the bees if I run short, so. But I see your point about the freezing.
So the thing with honey is, if you want to use honey as a feed, you can go ahead and dilute that with water and put it inside the colony. But be careful of your honey source because honey can have American cobweb spores in it.
And there's a problem with using honey, if you dilute it, it tends to ferment really fast. Like going to bees. So the bees don't take that honey, they can't ferment it, so you're giving a lot of dysentery.
Oh, that's not good.
So how long will your sugar water mixture last before it starts to spill?
It depends upon the weather, how hot it is outside.
So
Yeah.
like in this weather right now, how
This
long
one.
will it last?
Oh, this weather, right now, maybe a week and a half.
And do any of the beekeepers use essential oils in their
I
sugar
don't.
water?
Any of you guys use essential oils?
What's that stimulant feeding product that mainly sells like bees?
Honeybee healthy?
Honeybee Healthy. I've used that before. It's got essential oils in it, but I'm not necessarily convinced it adds anything to the health or their factor. That's no good.
What was in there?
Honeybee healthy? They got some lemongrass oil in there, spearmint. I don't know. All kinds of weird stuff.
I've been using it, the Honeybee Healthy.
Yes.
Once your corn has been through that much oil, or let it cool down, you see the
Right, so, yeah, so what you're going to do is come back a week later and remove the cage, make sure she's out of it, of course, and then you're going to do your inspection to make sure that she was released and that she's in there and laying eggs. If, you know, a lot of people like to go in there and try and spot the queen. You don't necessarily have to, you know, when you come in a week later. You're just looking for eggs and larvae. If you can see eggs and larvae, then you're doing good. Don't worry if you can't see the queen. Correct. Then you put the next one.
Quick question, if you have a frame of honey from the previous year, can you use that to feed, or is that?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I have right now is boxes of frames with honey on them. And so I have some bee colonies that are lacking a little bit of feed, and so I pull those boxes out of storage and I supplement the colonies I have with that.
Where do you store those? How do you store those honey frames that you're gonna take for?
Well, I just leave them inside the box, and I got them inside of my office area. And I use Paramount on my equipment to keep the wax moth from tearing up the equipment.
How would you feed in the top bar?
Excuse me?
How would you feed in the top bar?
Ted had it set up for that last week that he showed you.
Just kind of in the back?
And what he had was a follower board. And the follower board is shaped just like the frames. It's a piece of plywood. And underneath it has a notch. And he has this.
Just in the back?
Yeah, he has that down inside of there and underneath that notch to feed his bees. Another feeder that you can design for yourself for the top bar hive is a following board feeder where you take 2 of those following boards and you put some sides on them and the bottom, and you route her out towards the top. Towards the top, you route her out a nice little entrance area for the bees to get to. And you dip that in wax several times to keep it from leaking, and you pull that out. So here's the California mini cage right here, the one that we showed you. This here is a 3-hole cage. We got one of these floating around with a queen in it. We talked about that. Okay, here we go. There's another one method of acquiring bees, capturing swarms in nucleus colonies.
Can you back up one slide, sorry?
Sure, you bet.
Do not disturb for a week.
Yes, 1 week.
Just let them be.
Let them do their thing, and in 1 week go in there and check to see if the queen was released, and that she's flying.
Okay, so usually you leave the queen cage in there and everything.
So you don't disturb them, but you have to feed them, right?
Correct.
So if you have the in-house feeder, is that 1 gallon going to be enough to feed them for that week's time?
Yes. And 1 gallon should be enough for them.
Jason, you got about 2 minutes left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Holy smokes.
The last one quicker.
So swarms, right around, for people that overwinter successful colonies, will have swarms starting in April. May seems to be the peak time of year for swarms that I've noticed, right around Memorial Day. When I want to take vacation, I get swarm calls. And so there's different methods of catching swarms. One is if they're just hanging loose in a tree somewhere, you can get a big garbage bag and have some pruners to get rid of the extra branches around you. And you put that garbage bag over the bees, and then you shake the branch really hard and get the bees inside that bag. And then you have your box prepared just like you were going to go ahead and put some baggage bees in there. And you take the end of the bag, the open side, and you put it down in here and shake all the bees in there, put the frames in there just like you would if you were doing package bees. Another method for capturing swarms is to have a swarm box. Here's a swarm box. You see underneath all the frames that are in there? And this here actually has a rope and pulley system, so you can put it up in a tree somewhere. And when I'm ready to move it, I haven't actually used it yet, but when it's time to be moved, it has little sliders here at the entrance so I can lock the bees in and get the swarm. Another method of acquiring bees is nucleus colonies. Be careful what you buy. They cost anywhere from $110 all the way up to $200, and you're taking a gamble on using somebody else's equipment. You know, you don't know what they've done to that equipment. You don't know if they treated it with terramycin because they had American foul brood. You don't know what shape the bees are in, if they've used the appropriate miticide to keep the mites down. So you just got to really know the person that you're buying nucleus colonies from. If you're buying nucleus colonies for about $200, to me that's kind of pricey. You know, right around the $110 to $130 to me is an appropriate range for nucleus colonies. And nucleus colonies are generally about 5 frames of bees. Not necessarily in this order, but you generally have a frame of honey, a frame of pollen, and about 2 to 3 frames of eggs, larvae, and capped brood in there. Sometimes you have it all mixed up within the 5 frames. So as long as you have some food in there and 2 to 3 frames of eggs, larvae, capped brood, then that makes up a nucleus colony. And that's just a starter colony. Some of the nucleus colonies that you buy already have the queen released in there. And as beginning beekeepers, that's what you want. You want to have the queen already released and already laying. You don't want to have to mess around with queen introductions. Some nucleus colonies that you buy are divisions that beekeepers just made up on the spot, and they have brand new queens that they ordered, and they're in a cage, and they go inside of that nucleus colony on one of the frames, and you're looking at a queen introduction, which you don't want to mess around with as a beginning beekeeper. You want to have that queen already introduced and laying for you. And that's the end.
Yes.
So some YouTubes I've watched, it looks like they have like little paint on top of the thing.
Which one?
Some YouTubes I've seen, they have like little colored paints, you can spot your picture. How would they see that?
Where's that queen? You hear that queen floating around here somewhere? Oh, she's over there? Yeah, we got one with paint on it over there. So, oh, here we go. This is made by Uniposca, which is out of Man Lake Chatalock. And I remove my own queens. What we do is we grab a hold of the queen by the front legs, you hold her, you put a little dab of paint right on the floor. Okay, hold on to the sometimes you can get lucky when she's running around on the frame and she'll stop and you can get her real quick. But more often than not, she'll take off right when you're coming down with the pen, and then you just have a long streak on her queen.
I just wonder what should that in the box.
Yeah, the queens that you're supposed to be getting is an actual mark on them. So if you actually want to try and find your queen inside the colony, you're looking for size. Any other questions? Yes.
If you had a colony die off, would that be a time where you'd use one of those colonies we talked about last?
Oh, nucleus colonies? Yeah, you could do that. Or buy another package the following year.
But you would need to wait for next year before you start this one.
Right, unless you can find a swarm during the summertime.
I don't know, if you have the queen in the form, or like if the queen ever leaves, that's because she's in there.
Yeah, she's in the swarm. And so once you go ahead and you put the swarm inside the box, you can tell that she's in there because all the bees are going to be at the entrance around that box fanning. They have their abdomens up in the air, with the nasonoph gland exposed, they're putting out the scent, and they'll be fanning very heavily. And that's when you know that the queen's in the box.
So there's a break, if I'm not incorrect, at the top of the hour where there's lots of beekeepers available for your questions. I want to make sure we get through the rest of the subject material so we can take tests. Okay. And as I just rudely interrupted, my name is TJ Jorgensen. We keep bees up in Hansville. We have a little operation called Hansville Honey Farm, which depending on the year, we sell honey. And I've been doing it about 6 or 7 years now, and I have never been stung. This guy, you know, Jason, I don't know. Being stung 6 times in the face, I don't know. Never happened to me, except when my neighbors are watching and I'm trying to impress people, and that's when it always happens. So, spring management. This is when things are starting to get busy. Okay, this is when you're starting to warm, the weather's starting to warm up, you can actually get out and look at your bees. I look at it like this, is that, if it's warm enough to wax my car, it's warm enough to look at bees. If it's too hot to wax my car, I'm not interested in going work the bees too much, because I get sweaty. Let's see, the common goals, right, for spring management is to keep your colony alive. That's the goal of our association, that's the goal of this class, is to make you successful beekeepers and bring them through your first 5 through the first year. Keep your colony healthy, keep your equipment functional. It's expensive. You have a capital investment that you make at the beginning of this hobby. You want to maintain that equipment. And keep your colony growing and expanding, right, for obvious reasons. Unless you, I mean, there's some people who are like, I just want 1 hive. That's all I want. I would encourage you to maybe start with 2 hives, simply because if you lose 1 hive, they're very different animals. Each hive has its own characteristics, but if you lose 1, then you wait a whole other year to start again, or it's hard to source bees at the time of the year that you lose it. It's disheartening, and you lose interest in it. And it's also really neat to have 2 different colonies to compare against one another. Because again, they act very differently, different behavior, just different challenges in general. And it can help you learn more and more about all kinds of different elements of beekeeping by just having those two hives. Specific goals would be prevent swarming, build population before nectar flows. The idea behind that, of course, is that for us, we use bees to create honey. I shouldn't say we use bees, that's not technically correct, but that's what we're interested in. We're interested in beekeeping for the honey. And so we want to make sure we have healthy, large populations to take advantage of around here the blackberry flow that happens in June, starting in June for us. Same if your interest is pollination. You want to build up your population of bees for pollination. And it all goes back to having healthy hives, healthy bees. Allow bees to do their thing. I love it. This is a pretty good, it's kind of there's a couple things crossed up here. But the idea is that start feeding candy, you're doing some sort of dry feeding starting in February. I mean, I haven't felt the need to dry feed. I know people that do it have done it, and it's worked very well for them. Some people use it to lower moisture content in the hive by feeding dry sugar. I just never really have. Start feeding syrup starting in about this time of year, right? Depending on the hive, depending on the quality of the stores, depending on the size, depending on where we're at in the hive. This time of year, I also reverse my boxes. So this time of year, the queen is up in the top box, and I still may have honey down below, just on the sides where they never got to. The cluster just moved up through the wintertime. And I'll just swap those boxes so they put the queen down below, and then I rearrange the top box to give them some easily accessible honey. And then allows for her more space to start laying. You start moving into June and July, blackberry bloom is on, and hopefully by that point your bees are going strong. You've gone through the swarm season, and you've undoubtedly had swarms. And that'll either be a good experience for you to learn how to catch swarms, because that's fun. It is, it's a blast. It's also a good experience in how to improve the quality of your apiary as far as the number of bees that you have and the variation of the bees that you have. Some people, the first year I kept bees, I went in with 2 hives, and I went into the winter with 7 colonies. I kind of got kind of sickness. I wanted more. So, overwintered colonies, we don't have snow around here that often, but we have these depressingly long, cool springs, which is, for me, one of the biggest reasons why keeping bees in the Northwest is one of the most challenging environments to do it in. You know, the rest of the year, you get this in the middle of January, guess what happens come April? You get sunshine, it starts to warm up. Around here, this, is very uncommon. We have these long, dreary springs that last to the 4th of July. Well, guess what? Bees don't like to get out and fly when it's cold and crummy. They're like me. They want to stay inside and watch top gear. They're like, I'm not going to go outside and mess around with flowers that I can't see or get to. So we're playing the weather game in the spring. We're hoping, like right now, bees are starting to get very, very active. Things are going fast, and maple is starting to get ready to come on here not too much longer. And the bees are growing. If we get hit with a cold spell, all of that expansion that they've spent the last month doing is going to immediately just be gone, because that cluster will shrink in order to protect the queen in a cold snap, and we'll lose all that brood. And that can set a hive back. It happened a couple of years ago. We had an unseasonably late freeze, and it put us back quite some time.
You got a question?
There's a number of different dry feeds you can use. You can use dry sugar. Literally, you can just put dry sugar on a piece of newspaper. You can put it on top of the inner cover. There's people who use fondant, which is like a candy, depending on the thickness, can be very thick, and some people make it kind of runny. There's a number of different things, and that gives them something to feed on in the wintertime if they absolutely run bone-dry feed. I've got the time I think this would be most effective is if you're dealing with a hive that was really big going into fall, and we had a lot of warm weather late in the fall, and they consumed most of their stores before they got into wintertime. I can see that being a really big advantage. I just never done it. Make sure you keep the entrances clear of snow and dead bees. I've learned my lesson on opening my hives until when it's warm enough outside. I did this this was probably the second year I kept bees. I was really eager, and I want to see what's going on. And it was a beautiful February day, and it was like 40 degrees, it felt like on my skin, and I lifted it up, and everything was great and wonderful, and that hive didn't last much longer because of the damage I'd done to the brood by exposing them to those low temperatures. Move dead hives from the apiary and clean them up. That'll be a real tell of just how fastidious and disciplined a beekeeper you are. You like things to get messy, and things if you don't pick up after yourself, things get messy real quick. And I've got experience with dead hives sitting in my apiary for 3 months and going out trying to clean them out. It's miserable. It's miserable. It's miserable. 2 parts sugar, 1 part water for your serve ratio. That's a typically a ratio that we would use in the fall because you're creating a dense sugar source for them, versus in the springtime, you start feeding them 1 part sugar, 1 part water, which is more of a mimic of a natural nectar source, which stimulates the queen into laying their eggs in addition to providing them some stores. Over 55, knock yourself out, go in and take a peek at the hive. And as far as feeding sugar syrup, everybody's experience is different. I look at it like this: once after they get beyond that package stage of the first couple of weeks, you're going to be putting on a quart of syrup a day. Once they start building up, you're going to be out there. And so then you start thinking, what's the best way I can maximize my efficiency? And I've created jigs using 4 mason jars. I've used gallon pickle jars in there. I like using jars myself. But they will start taking it more, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't, they're never going to go out and get anything because I just keep feeding them. What I found for myself is once something better is out there, and everything is better than sugar syrup, they go for that. Okay? They go for a natural nectar source whenever they have it. We simply don't have a natural nectar source that exists of any quality between maples and blackberry. And then after blackberry, we get a smattering of things, and blackberry's huge. But we get a smattering of things, knotweed, for example, that happens in the summertime. But we don't have this large variety of nectar-producing plants that they can consume starting in March, going all the way to fall. We're limited, so we're managing to that as well. So the idea of natural beekeeping, I don't want to imply that there's somehow a controversy that exists in beekeeping between non-natural or natural beekeeping, because that isn't the point. But certainly people who more prefer an approach to their bees that requires less intervention are going to be starting to remove the dead hives, remove the weak hives. The weak hives don't seem to be being successful under the threats of a long spring, varroa mites, whatever it may be. And the idea is that the bees that survive are more better suited to our climate. You can go into the summer with a bunch of small, weak colonies. Maybe they were packages and you didn't feed them. If you don't feed your packages are going to die. A lot of people start off thinking they can put packages in the box and they'll just find that they will die. And guaranteed we'll get 10 calls within the first couple of weeks after package day saying, why didn't my bees die? And that's mostly because they weren't fed. But the idea is that when it comes June, and you've got blackberry coming on and you're looking at the size of these hives, the hives that are, at the time the blackberry come on, you should have 2 full deep boxes full of bees. About 50,000 bees. That's the peak of their population, roughly. So if it's anything less than that, if you're looking at a box that maybe it's half full, or maybe the queen just isn't producing as well as it is, this is the point where you're going to do combines between hives, because it's much more of an advantage to use a beekeeper and to the success of the colony if it has enough numbers to take advantage of the nectar source to provide their stores in the wintertime. Also be able to survive by reproducing through swarming. But, you know, they survive better through the winter because they have more room to lose bees. You have a larger colony going through the fall. When she stops laying, that colony dies back down. You still have a fairly decent, successful, healthy population being able to overwinter through hopefully what amounts to a short spring.
So if you think it's a problem with the queen, should you fire the queen and get a new one?
You do that in the fall. As far as requeening in the spring, it's really hard to find commercially available mated queens because every commercial person in the United States is now buying them and they're really expensive. So requeening should be done in the fall. You can do proactive requeening, meaning she's been laying for a year, 2 years, depending on what you feel like. You can replace her in the fall before they go into the winter, and then they go into the winter and come out in the spring with a fresh new queen. Or you can choose to requeen in June, right? And then maybe hopefully build them up by the time they go into the winter. The chances of you claiming honey off of those are going to be small. There's management techniques where you can actually take a queen inside and produce a fairly large volume of honey, but trying to find a mated queen in March and April is very difficult. Hopefully you've got more than one colony, right? And so when one is not doing well, the other one's hopefully doing well, and you can combine those 2 colonies together. And then you've got a queen that is hopefully healthy enough and successful enough to bring through until you're ready to invest in a queen and buy a commercially available queen breeder. We have a number here. Jason Deal happens to be one of the best in our area, and I would encourage you to look at his stuff. But that's going to be when you're going to want to requeen is later into the warmer time. This time of year is going to be hard and it's expensive. Another way to improve the strength of the colony is just switch spots. Bees are cued into a particular location for their hive. So if you move a strong colony and you place it with a weak colony during the day when the foragers are out, the foragers all come back to the population, to the hive that's been placed there. And move that up.
Don't they have issues if bees that are not part of their?
Guard bees in the hive, well, if you're bringing in goodies, party's on.
Yeah.
Come on in. Totally aren't going to kick you out. Exactly. This is a great. There's some really good. Once you see an actual brood frame, what it actually looks like when it's got bees in. So it's awesome. It's going to be great. You guys are going to be amazed when you look down. You see the little eggs in the center of the frame, right? Where she started to refill. So the queen, like, all right. I'm trying to look at the best way to describe this. I look at a good brood laying pattern similar to this. You have a nice concentric pattern with a little bit of a honey arch on the outside. Okay, and a fairly solid capping on it, meaning like you're not going to have a huge disparity between the ages of the larvae on that frame. Okay, they were all laid within a relatively similar, or the relatively the same time, roughly, right? But it also means that they're covered, that generally speaking, that the larvae are healthy. If the hygienic behavior of honeybees, if those larvae are sick or damaged or injured in some way, they will go in and remove the larvae and carry them out. In fact, that's a trait we breed for. In many cases, it's a way of combating varroa mite. But a nice, consistent laying pattern is what we're looking for. You get something more of a shotgun pattern or this kind of crummy, ducky, I mean, it'll appeal to your sense of symmetry. That's the best way to describe it. And it could be what they call a shotgun pattern, meaning there's larvae of different ages, all over the frame, empty cells. Most often, the thing I found with a poor queen isn't that she lays too much, it's that she lays too little. She's laying too few bees. There's a number of different ways to manipulate your frames. There's really no time for me to really go into it here in depth. I would say that before you start manipulating frames, take your specific situation and approach your mentor or another beekeeper in the association or to our Yahoo group, because I've made mistakes in manipulating frames, and what you can actually do is create barriers within the hive itself so that the bees think that their population has been cut in half. They've actually lost half of their space, which can stimulate the swarm response, which if you're doing frame rotation, you're trying to give them the idea they have more space than they actually do. So it's hard to start thinking like a bee, right? You have to start thinking like a bee. Thinking like a beekeeper is, thinking like a bee is where it's at, and it's incredibly difficult, believe it or not. They're hardwired, instinctive creatures that, for some reason, I still haven't even come close to figuring out. You can split hives in the late spring as a way of increasing your population as well. The key with that is making sure that your temperatures outside are warm enough for the queen to fly up and mate. We've gone over queen biology and the temperature that she needs to be able to go out and mate. 68, 69 degrees is when she flies to go on her mating flight. And so if you do a split, you're taking one queen and you're putting it in one half of the bees in one box, and you're taking the other half of the bees and some frames of brood or frames of eggs, and you're putting it in another box, and then you're saying, if you're not going to introduce a commercially available queen, you're saying to them, go ahead and raise your own. So you go through the timeline. You go through how long it takes for the queen to mature. How long does it take for her to actually get established in the colony and kill off all the other queens? And then when does she fly? How long does it take before she starts mating? You start doing all of that math. You have to make sure that she's going to be able to be viable when it's going to be warm enough. Again, around here, how often do we get above 70 degrees before the live order? It's kind of you're kind of playing a guessing game and a hoping game to some degree or another. But a commercial queen breeder is much more skilled at it, certainly I am. When you're going through your hives and you're looking through the hives that inevitably have died, you're going to have some dead loss. I mean, I'll break it to you now. You know, it's perfect. And to go through and see what happened. Okay, most oftentimes it's starvation, but what I've found is that the threats that parasites have on a honeybee's health creates a cascade of effects that affects not only how much they produce in the fall, but what the quality of the brood is. And so you'll do varroa, you'll look for evidence of varroa, you'll look for evidence of foul brood, and you'll know that by the smell. Hopefully we'll have an example of foul brood in the class, because that's something you'll never forget. But generally speaking, I found that the two biggest problems I have coming into the spring is that were bees that were weak colonies going into the fall, usually problems with varroa mite. They had heavy varroa loads that never got resolved no matter what I did, or they simply didn't have enough food to succeed through the spring. Those are kind of the two big issues for me. So this is your opportunity. You're looking at the hive. It's empty. This is your time. You can feed. You can start your feeding. You start not only for the queen to start laying, but also just to give them food. You can do some frame rotation. There are pollen patties, commercially available pollen patties. There's also a number of different recipes you can find online for a pollen patty, and the idea is giving them a protein source. Stedman's may have some of the commercially available ones. I know that there's a number of members of our association that have posted on our Yahoo group recipes for their pollen patties. There it is. I'll tell you this flat out, there's absolutely no way that anybody can encapsulate 4 months of beekeeping or 3 months of beekeeping into a 25-minute presentation. I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, sign up for the Yahoo group, get connected with other existing beekeepers, and get yourself a mentor that you can call and contact, or get a couple of them. There's nobody in this room that wouldn't love to sit and talk about bees. So I encourage you to do that, and we'll hope to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you.